So, you're a business owner dedicated to the significant and sustainable growth of both you and your business. Welcome to the Add a Zero podcast.
Hi, I'm Jay Allen. Welcome to the Add a Zero podcast. Delighted to have you here today as we talk about either a lifestyle business or a business that's fit to scale. Where do you fit within this and why does it really matter? Over the last few weeks or so, I've had several conversations with clients, both existing and prospective for next year, talking about what does success means to them. Now, let me just put this into context to help you understand as to why it's relevant and important and why you should spend some time today working out what that is. I'm fortunate enough that as a keynote speaker, I've spoken on conferences and events all over the world to 35 countries and counting as we speak. And I've met a whole myriad of different people from different cultures and different experiences at different levels of business. I've met people who have just started out in business or on the cusp of earning their first ever client, all the way through to multi-industry sectors, CEOs of global businesses, and everywhere in between. And yet, if there's one thing that I've found that is completely and utterly unique to each and every one of them, it's the definition of the word success. What does success actually mean to you? You see, social media will have us believe that success is a number, that it's a 10 grand month, a 100 grand month, a 10 grand day, a 100 grand day. They put a financial measure on a specific time frame and call it success. And yet I can guarantee you, having been to some of those places, I didn't feel any more different than I did before. The day didn't change, nor did the next week or month or year. You see, success isn't a number. The number enables us to do things that we might measure as successful, but we've got to understand as to what does success actually means to you. What are we actually working for and towards, and how will we know when we've achieved it? So, what does the word success mean in your life? Now, I've asked this not just tens or even hundreds, but possibly a couple of thousand times over the last 10, 15, almost 20 years supporting SMEs in this space, both here and abroad, to understand as to what is it all for. And what we've established is success is as unique as your fingerprint, and it changes from times to time. I can guarantee you, I've met business owners in the last month or so that have told me, Jay, success is getting to Friday without killing somebody. Now, I know that they're only being, flippant and not literal, but there are times where success is restraint. Others will tell, well, success is once I've got another member of staff so I don't have to do X anymore. Success is so undefined that how on earth will you ever know whether you've truly achieved it if we don't know what that is that we're trying to achieve? So the first of all is, how will you define what success actually is to you? How will you know when you've achieved that? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What does it smell and taste like? A while ago, a few years ago now, I was interviewed by a good friend on his podcast. Nick Bradley I've known for a number of years now, and when he first launched Scale Up Your Business, I was very grateful to have been invited to be a customer and a guest on his podcast. I think it was possibly episode 73, 4, 5, somewhere along there in the 70s. I know that Nick's relatively celebrated his 250th episode, I think it is on now. But right at the very beginning of his podcast journey, I was was fortunate enough to have been invited to be a guest on it. And I'll never forget, at the end of the interview, off camera, and once all of the recordings were over, he said, "Jay, thank you. That was both the best and the worst interview that I've done to date." I went, "Sorry?" "It was the best and the worst." He went, "Yes, definitely." So help me to understand that, which on itself appears a bit of an oxymoron. How can it be possibly the best and the worst? He says, "Well, the best, I've done 70 odd interviews, and that's the first time that we've been able to get through an entire hour's interview in one take. There was no coughs, there was no sneezes, no phones went off, the alarms didn't go off, the lights didn't flicker or twitch, or there wasn't a siren go past. We were able to get through the whole thing without interruption, and knowing that that's good enough to be able to, unedited, release to our audience. Thank you." I says, well, thank you very much. That was really kind. Why the worst? He said, "Until you cracked that gag." I went, "Right." He says, "And I don't think any of our podcast listeners are going to be willing to listen for long enough that it took us to recompose ourselves before we could carry on with the interview. I'm going to have to learn how to edit the laugh." And I smiled. You see, what I'd spoken about is when people achieve success. I believe, and again, it's only a personal belief, but it's something that I've witnessed time and time and time and time again, but I believe that we all have a number. A number that's possibly been dictated to us by social media, by presumption, by expectation, something that we have been forced upon us, or something that we've created from a subconscious mind. But I believe that we all, somewhere deep inside our head or our soul or somewhere within us, have a number. And on occasion, we wake up one morning and we realise, we physically acknowledge, I've hit that number. I remember the first time when I started a business and I'd set a goal that before we retire, bearing in mind this is 15, 20 years ago now when I first started out my entrepreneurial journey, but when I first started out as a solopreneur and I said, I want to hit 500,000. It wasn't even 1 million. The business was in its infancy, and my vision for the future and what that might hold and what that might mean for me and my family, I want to hit 500,000 turnover. And then a few months down the line, when we got to that figure, when we realised at the end of the year that year we'd invoiced 612,000, we hardly celebrated before we said, well, what will 1 million look like? And we just recalibrated, we reset. We hardly even acknowledged the moments before we were moving on. In the interview with Nick, I said, there are some people that wake up one morning and acknowledge that they've hit that magic number and become a schmuck. They become arrogant and self-belief goes through the roof. Ego takes over. They subsequently become very materialistic and very keen to show the world that they've hit their number. And let's face it, we've all been bombarded with social media feeds of people who have hit a number. So much so that we start to believe as consumers of that that's what success is. And therefore we redefine what we believe it to be more aligned with what other people are now telling us that success is. And the first thing I want you to do is to get all of that out your head. Success isn't a number. Success isn't defined by a certain period of time. Surely success is to be able to do what you want, when you want, where you want, with whom you want. Surely that's success. Or at least that would be my measure of success. To be able to have the time, freedom to do what I want, wherever I want, with whom I want to do it with. Be that a weekend walking in the Welsh Hills, about an hour's drive from where I live, or jumping on business class and flying out to Bali for a month on the beach and chilling out. Being able to go scuba diving in Mexico or abseiling in Switzerland. Surely that is success. And the number is merely a means to enable us to achieve that. It shouldn't be that that is the success, but what it enables us to then do should be the measure of success, or at least that's my personal definition of success. And interestingly enough, I don't believe in bucket lists or ticking things off. I believe in living lists, making a list of the things that I'm going to do in the next 12 to 24 months, that as I tick them off and say, done that, it then opens up a new series of things that I'd never even considered before, of the things that I'd like to do next. Success is such a personal and journey of what next, what next, what next. How do I make that possible? When will I find the times to be able to do that? When would I like to do that? Who would I like to do that with? For me, that is success. And my business is merely a means of being able to enabling me to achieve those things. It's an enabler. It's not a measure. However, I did go on to say in that interview, and what I'd like to share with you again today, is that most people who I believe then subsequently find and hit that number, even if some of them very temporarily become quite egotistical and materialistic, thankfully the majority of them then set, they recalibrate. They say, well, if I've achieved this by X, I wonder if I could achieve that by Y. And they reset, they create a new number, and the majority of the people that I've met that have gone through that evolution become quite philanthropic the next time round. They become more donation generous. They become more supportive of others. They've achieved it for themselves. They now look to achieve it for others or with others or in a different manner. It becomes a different way of doing business. A win-win-win outcome, as I like to suggest to people. A win for you, a win for me, and a win for the universe. However, I am really, really concerned about the amount of business owners that there are out there that are striving every single day to be able to grow and evolve and hugely impact them and their business and the people that work within it, with no exit plan, with no understanding about what does it mean when we get there. It's like the athlete that starts off at grassroots level and then gets spotted by a scout and subsequently gets onto a platform. They join a club, they get a coach, they grow, they evolve. They're spotted and they are invited to try out for the Olympic team. And they spend the next 4 years devoting their life to anything and everything for that one race and the gold medal. They've set their entire being around that goal, and nothing, not birthdays or Christmases or families or weddings or funerals or illness or sickness or injury, stops them from working every single hour towards achieving that as an outcome. And yet the amount of people that have gone on to get a gold medal and go through a massive risk of mental health risk and depression. Because for so much time, they've created their entire existence, their entire identity around achieving something so finite that once it's been achieved, they don't know who they are or what to do or how to recalibrate. And there are too many business owners. I'm hoping that you listening to this aren't one of them that have determined that your whole identity has been defined by your career, your profession, by who you are, by what you do. That success is being measured by the amount of clients that you have or how much money that the business is generating, and not who you are as an individual and the experiences that you're able to bring to the world. And yet, I genuinely believe that the moments that you become an employer, the moments that somebody else's income is directly related to you and your business, that we have a moral obligation to be able to create a business that is sustainable enough, that continues to provide them with an employment for as long as they are worthy of that. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not talking about employing people that then subsequently just slack off. I'm talking about creating a business that is growing and evolving, and it doesn't get interfered with the moment that we hit our number. That we don't put at risk other people's career, other people's progression, other people's success, other people's capability, because we've achieved our number. And the business plateaus because there's no drive or emphasis any longer. And as a result, the talent gets fed up with having pushed and pushed and pushed to grow it, to subsequently just sitting there, creating nothing but dust. It hits a brick wall. They get bored because they're so excited and ignited by the drive that we've had for the last 5, 10, 15 years to get there, that when it stops, because you've stopped, because you've semi-retired and made it, that they get bored and fed up and move to somewhere else so they can strive for that further. And as a result, you're now forced to come back into the business, reluctant and frustrated by the fact that it's peaks and troughs and peaks and troughs. We've got to have a plan. I've said in a previous podcast already, one of the primary things that you should be doing in a business is to being able to create your own redundancy from it. I'm not talking about the P45, I'm talking about the ability for the business to continue to grow and evolve and develop without being critical of you and your involvement in it. To become surplus to requirement. That you can choose to be back in the business as and when you choose to do so, and the role and the responsibilities that you see are best required for the business in that servant leadership that we spoke about recently. But for the business to have a life of its own, an identity of its own, for it to continue to grow and evolve and develop beyond your capability, that as it continues to grow and evolve and develop, you might continue to receive shares if you've set the business up in such a way, but it doesn't hinder the growth and development of the people beyond us who are going to evolve and take it to the next level. Be that through an MBO or a management buyout, or if we then subsequently sell it as a commercial entity for somebody else to be able to take on, evolve and develop. I genuinely believe that the moment that we employ someone, we deserve to create a career for them. And that means to create a growing business that they can grow with. Now that means that we have to create an exit plan for our involvement within the business, and understand as to what is the business going to continue to do beyond our involvement within it. One of the first 2 exercises that we do with all of the clients that we work with within My True North is both personal goals and business goals. Understand what it is that you want to achieve in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What does the business need to do in order for you to be able to achieve them? And then create a business goal 2, 3, 4 years beyond that, that once you've achieved that level of success, if you chose to step off and say, do you know what, that's it, I'm done, that we don't lose the staff or the impetus or the growth and development of the business as a result because you've chosen that you've had enough. That we've created a business that has the capacity to grow and evolve and develop beyond you, and a team of people that are inspired to be able to help us to be able to get there. If that's something of interest to you, then we really ought to have a conversation about how Adazero puts the significant and the sustainable growth as the forefront of you and your business. God bless. Take care. I'll see you again next week.
That's all for this episode. As always, we really thank you for listening and welcome your comments, thoughts, and suggestions. So please do drop us a line by emailing podcast@mytruenorth.biz. And don't forget, if you haven't already done so, hit the subscribe button on whichever platform you're listening to this through. And tell your colleagues and business network all about who we are. You've been listening to the Adazero podcast, presented by Jay Allen. Brought to you in association with My True North, the UK's leading ethical coaching company.